So welcome to this webinar on promoting women in law enforcement in ASEAN region. This is a side event to the 10th COP. My name is Gail Demolis and I'm Program Specialist with UN Women Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, and I will be moderating today's session. Today we will be discussing a research that was conducted by Interpol, UN Women and UNDC for the past 18 months. And this was possible because of the support and the generous support of the government of Canada. And this research is particularly important for two reasons. First, it provides up-to-date data on the number of women in law enforcement in ASEAN member states. And secondly, the research is based on the interviews conducted with almost 200 law enforcement officers, and the vast majority being women. So these interviews were conducted in the 10 countries of ASEAN, so it reflects what they think are the barriers that women face in accessing, being promoted, being retained, and advancing their careers as law enforcement officers. To share the key findings of the research as well as recommendations, today we will have Maria Biela Alonso joining from Lyon, France, representing Interpol, and Mrs. Sushaya Makasen joining from Bangkok, Thailand, and representing UNDC. And to answer your questions, Dr. Melissa Jardine, one of the lead authors of the research, will be also with us, joining from Sydney in Australia. So before we move to the PowerPoint presentation, I would like to show you an animated video that UN Women developed in partnership, of course, with UNDC and Interpol on women in law enforcement as an introduction to the research.
More women in law enforcement, a necessity for ASEAN communities. Women police help build trust within communities. They're able to solve crimes thanks to their ability to obtain different information than male officers. Increasing the role of women in policing has proven to be effective in reducing the incidence of gender-based violence.
We are proficient at gathering intelligence and we excel at investigations.
Women are great police officers. They can be strong leaders in the community, building trust and bringing a wide range of skills.
Oh my, now that's what I call great teamwork.
Tackling a challenging situation is about skills, not strength.
However, the percentage of women in law enforcement in ASEAN countries remains relatively low. While some ASEAN countries are making efforts to promote the role of women in law enforcement, more can be done. Discriminatory practices that prevent women from considering law enforcement as a career need to end. For instance, in some countries, women have to remain unmarried for several years after graduating. This rule does not apply to men.
Women should always be given the opportunity to apply their skills and knowledge in operational roles.
One way to achieve that is by taking part in deployments and modern policing functions.
We also need more women to lead and command, becoming role models for next generations.
A regional strategy and country-specific action plans for gender-responsive law enforcement institutions and monitor their progress would be great. We need the skills of men and women to better protect men, women, boys and girls, and to bring peace and security to our communities.
Law enforcement is a career for all.
Now we'd like to introduce you to our two first panelists who will present their research. First, Mrs. Maria Biela Alonso. She represents Interpol today. She is the gender affairs expert. She is a senior police constable of the Spanish National Police and served for the past 17 years. She has an extensive experience in counter-smuggling of migrants, trafficking in person, maritime and air border operations, countering terrorism, and police international cooperation. While Maria Biela Alonso will present the key findings, the key recommendations will be presented by Mrs. Sushaya Mukasen. Mrs. Sushaya Mukasen is a National Program Officer working in the Border Management Program for UNDC Regional Office for Southeast Asia and the Pacific in Bangkok. She's working currently on the rollout of the training on gender-sensitive and victim-centered approach to human trafficking investigation in ASEAN, as well as improving the capacity of law enforcement officers to address the needs of women and girls at border crossing. Prior to joining UNDC, she worked on transnational organized crime issues for 7 years as a special case officer at the Thai Department of Special Investigation under Ministry of Justice in Thailand. Marianne Sushaya, the floor is yours.
Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure for me to present to you today the key findings of this research conducted over this past year in partnership with our colleagues from UN Women and UNODC. My name is Maria Biela. I'm a Spanish National Police Officer and one of the Interpol's Gender Affairs Expert. I would like to thank Interpol, my dear colleague Irina de Almeida, who cannot join us today. She is the Interpol Senior Gender Affairs Expert, and all of you for the opportunity of joining this event and to be somehow a role model for other police women back home. 1 year ago, I was police officer. Now I'm here joining you and advocating for equality and women's rights within the law enforcement. I will briefly start by saying what we aim with this research and a few words about the methodology we use. I will afterwards present some of the key findings on recruitment, training, deployment, promotion, and resources. And my UNODC colleague Chaya will conclude with the key recommendations. We all agree that increasing gender equality in law enforcement contribute to better address public safety and security both at a national level, regional, international, as well as working to tackle transnational crimes. The meaningful participation of women in law enforcement has been globally acknowledged as vital to promoting gender equality and increasing the operational effectiveness of law enforcement. Increased attention is actually being given to the gender dimensions of crime, victim impacts, and the operational capabilities that law enforcement agencies require to analyze, investigate, and combat crimes at the local, transnational, and regional levels. The nature of policing, crime, and criminal investigations is continuing evolving. I hope with this, I have painted the general outlook for this presentation. This study is actually the first of its kind to gather comprehensive information on this topic in the region. It explores the experiences and views of women police officers from across the Asian region. In particular, the study aimed to investigate, identify, and inform. The analysis of the findings is based on interviews with officers. They form the basis for recommendations regarding how to best mitigate or overcome these challenges and aims afterwards to inform targeted interventions of Interpol, UN Women, and UNODC, and other international, regional, or national actors. The methodology used to develop this study included desk reviews, a short questionnaire, semi-structured interviews, and focus groups discussions. Interpol team conducted with 193 and 198 female and male officers in the Asian countries. Also consultations organized by UN Women and UNODC in selected number of countries. You have now on the screen the percentage of women law enforcement officers in the Asian region. Women's representation in law enforcement agencies remains relatively low. Available statistics indicate women comprise between approximately the 6% in Indonesia and the 20% in Laos of law enforcement workforces. However, the numbers do not paint the entire picture. There has been significant progress with regards to the deployment of women across a range of policing functions. Some caution should be exercised in analyzing these figures, as they are not quite comparable across all countries. We only have estimation of all the women working in law enforcement in some countries, while in other countries we have figures only for commissioned officers. Almost all law enforcement agencies in the region have allowed women to join their respective police academies, trainings, colleges. Most countries have quotas between the 10 and the 30% or target for women recruitment. In addition to the traditional police academies, recruitments for the law enforcement agencies are also done via recruitments of university graduates with civilian backgrounds to serve in specialized roles. In some countries, this extends to, for instance, DNA experts or environmental crime investigations. This has in many cases contributed to boost the number of women working in law enforcement. However, the downside of such approach is that officers recruited through this channel might have limited opportunities of career development. What contributed to women joining the law enforcement career? Legislation or internal policies that require women officers to deal with cases of sexual and gender-based violence. Several police forces, like Indonesia, have done targeted recruitments. And also standardized admission criteria for both men and women in police academies also contributes to ensure women have equal chances to enter in the profession. The challenges, one of the most important reasons appears to be the use of quota system. Gender quotas often appear to be used not as a temporary special measure, but as a ceiling for regulating women access to the profession. It sets a limit on how many female officers can be recruited any given year. There are some cases where requirements for women-only admission conditions still exist. These are the stumbling blocks. For instance, requirements such as being unmarried at the time of application or remain unmarried for several years after graduating, or also the necessity to undergo virginity tests. Training on human rights and gender is rarely appearing to be available or compulsory in many instances. Female officers also reported having fewer opportunities to attend international trainings, which might then mean they have less opportunities to develop their professional skills, to be exposed to international best practices and the latest developments in their respective fields of expertise, and expand also their networks. Those are very important elements in an officer career path. The 194 women officers who participated in this study were deployed to a variety of specialization. And when deployed, female and male officers said that women bring added value to law enforcement. They improved operational effectiveness. For instance, officers reported female law enforcement agents are less aggressive, or at least are perceived to be so by the public. So, deploying women police in efforts to combat insurgencies and counterterrorism can be more effective than military responses due to their presence in a contact with local communities. Also, improve responses to gender-based violence and sexual crimes. It was a major driver, actually, for some police officers to open their ranks and to deploy them for operational duties. Increased diversity within law enforcement agencies definitely contributes to building trustworthy communities. Despite the investments in recruitment and training female personnel, there are challenges to their full and effective integration in law enforcement with respect to the limited nature of their deployments. A majority of women appear to be working in administrative positions, including even when they are working in operational departments. For example, they could be in charge of financial or human resources issues in a human trafficking department. In the traditionally male-dominated setting of law enforcement, women in high-ranking positions are exceptional in many ways. They are highly qualified professionals and experts in their respective fields of work. They have managed to strike a certain family-work balance, and in many cases, they have made significant personal sacrifices to achieve their status, as recounted by several officers. The available data actually indicates that women are slowly making their way in larger numbers in middle management positions in some countries. However, overall numbers are remaining low. Female leaders are important because they can challenge gender stereotypes and contribute to redefine the roles of women can fulfill in societies. Then, subsequently, send strong signals about women professional capabilities. They can be an inspiration for younger generations by showcasing that it is possible to build a career and act as mentors for younger officers, helping them to navigate in the organization. Younger women police officers reported they felt inspired and motivated by their female leaders, when women leaders also describe feeling a responsibility to support and to inspire younger generations. Female leaders believe having a male champion or sponsor is critical for gaining promotion, and they indicate that men's support for the advancement of women in law enforcement is essential given that men hold mass leadership roles with decision-making powers and high-level influence. Regarding human resources infrastructure, you can see the challenges on the screen. There might be short-term costs for creating adequate facilities and recruiting and deploying female officers to police and border management agencies, especially when we are talking about rural, remote, or border areas. Yet not making these investments leads actually to a failure to address gender inequality and crimes against women and children, which actually can have longer-term costs in terms of healthcare and lost productivity. I will pass now the floor to my colleague from UNODC, Chaya, to present the key recommendations of this study.
Thank you very much, Maria, and thanks, Gaia, for the introductions. Greeting everyone. I'm Sushaya Mokasen from the UNODC Border Management team. I'm a program officer, and I'm pleased to share with you the recommendation that draw on an analysis of the finding of this research, national legislations, and the individual and group interviews with male and female officers for this report. So with this, we have divided the key recommendation into 6 sets, which will echo the key findings that Maria just presented. First of all, we look at the policy and strategy to be implemented at the national level. So the report highlights that there's a need to first develop and improve the gender mainstreaming strategy, which build in monitoring and evaluation. And also, according to the interviewed, several female officers have expressed clearly that there's a need to establish an independent body or structure to receive and investigate complaints related to harassment and discrimination. The next set of recommendation is related to recruitment, training, and capacity building. It is recommended that first to develop or expand communication campaigns to ensure that law enforcement is portrayed as a career for both men and women. So this is why we have developed the animated video that you see at the beginning of the presentation, and you will be seeing another video, the humoristic video, which we decided to be able to break gender stereotype and portray the picture of this career that it's a career for all. And also we have arranged the photo exhibition at the venue that accessible easily by the public to portray women in law enforcement in action. Like what Maria said about quota, the issue about quota for women to join law enforcement is that it sometimes was seen as a maximum, right, or the ceiling, and this need to be revised. So the quota should rather be a temporary measure to ensure a minimum of representation of women in law enforcement. Next set of recommendation is the criteria that requires women to be unmarried whether it is when they are recruited or remain unmarried for several years after they have joined the force, this needs to be revised and removed, because otherwise it is a discriminatory policy and practice that doesn't apply to men. And also it is important to ensure that women are represented in recruitment selection committee and they have equal training opportunity, whether it is in-country training or international trainings, because training should be beneficial to both men and women equally. The third set of recommendation is related to deployment. So women need to have an access to or to be encouraged to participate in a wide range of operational deployments. This include considering the periodic rotation in operational roles for all officers. Moreover, law enforcement agencies should ensure that women's family and domestic responsibilities are not barrier for their participation in the training, and that there are solutions for women and men with family to be deployed and still being able to maintain their work-life balance. And the last point of the recommendation for deployment is that female and male officers need to have access to professional counseling and also psychological support. I think this is very important and really important as part of a self-care, because we all know that oftentimes officers have to deal with traumatic events or serious crimes, which can be very stressful. The fourth set of recommendations related to promotion and leadership. So in this picture, you can see a mid-career officer who benefit from the UNODC UN Women training on how to handle a case of trafficking. Mid-career officer like herself need to benefit from targeted training like leadership training, training to develop self-confidence to function at high level, as well as technical skills training in specialized area to be able to advance in their career. Another important thing is that they also need to have access to mentoring programs, and they should be mentored not only by female officer, but also by male officer as well, because oftentimes the male officer have senior position. So they need to be well mentored by both male and female. And also retention of female officer needs to be improved. For example, to guarantee that women who take maternity leave will be able to return to work in a comparable position. The next set of recommendations related to human resources, and there are three main recommendations related to this. The first one is peer support and advocacy network for women seems to work quite effectively at the national level. So we want to see more peer support and to build a supportive peer network at the regional level for women to share experience and best practices. And also part-time or flexible work arrangement policy should be revised or adopted. Similarly, officers also express their needs for parental leave, including paternity leave entitlement as well. The next slide shows the final set of recommendations, and this is very practical and related to infrastructure, facility, and equipment. So during the interview, an officer told my colleague that if you want to deploy someone, it's easy to deploy a male officer because he can sleep on a hammock. If you need to deploy female officer, you need to think of where she's going to sleep, where she's going to go to the bathroom. So the officer end up deploy a man. With this, we have reflected that infrastructures also need to enable women to be deployed without limitation. We need to ensure that separate facilities are available for men and women for changing, sleeping, and sanitation to enable both men and women to be deployed. And also, we need to ensure that women have appropriate uniform options for comfort, safety, and practicality when they're on duty. Thank you very much for your attention. I will now give the floor back to Gael.
I would like now to give the floor to a special guest, the Police Senior Superintendent Lista Kenter from the Indonesian National Police. She is the head of the Department of Center for Medical and Health. Her profile is very interesting as she graduated as a dentist and then joined the police as forensic dentist 16 years ago. Since then, she played a key role in identifying the remains of victims of disasters in Indonesia, but also in different countries abroad. So welcome, Police Senior Superintendent Lista Cantor, and thank you for agreeing to be with us today. I would like to ask you two questions in relation to the research that was presented. First, could you explain to the participants what are your functions today and why do you think it's important to have women police officers to do the job you're doing as well as other police functions?
Okay, thank you, Gail, for introducing me. Hi, everyone. Good evening from Jakarta. I am Lista Cantor, working for Indonesia National Police. And this opportunity, I will share my experience when working in a police, Indonesia National Police. My current position right now is the head of Disaster Victim Identification, or DVI Department of Center for Medical and Health of Indonesia National Police. My main task is carry out DVI operation activities and supervise all the DVI activities throughout Indonesia. I think it is very important to have a woman police in this activity because in DVI operation, we have a lot of contact with the victim's family regarding to collect antemortem data that we need for identification process. Sometimes it is very difficult to get information from the family because they are usually emotionally unstable, such as angry, sad, stressed, and sometimes not accepting that their family is the victim. They may be angry because they thought the identification process takes a long time. And to calm down the victim's family, it takes a great sense of empathy and patience. And I think women are more patient than men. In this difficult situation for the family, I always give them explanation one by one about what DVI is, how to do the identification process, what kind of data and information that I need from them, and what are the obstacles that we are facing when performing identification process. I gave them explanation with the patience and the empathy, and even sometimes I hug them, and sometimes they shed tears in my arms. So I think it is only simple thing that we could do. However, it means a lot, especially for the family who lost their loved ones. That's my experience when performing the DVI operation. So I think it's very important to have a woman police in my activity.
A second question for you is, in this research, we see that women have difficulties accessing leadership positions. Have you had to overcome obstacles yourself in your career to move up the ranks? And can you share any reflection you have on this issue?
Yes, I have as well to get my current position. So I got my current position as the head of DVI department of INP. And some people, including the commander, think that the head of DVI department should be head by a man because DVI is mainly field work. Disasters know no time, and the head of DVI must be ready to go whenever and wherever a disaster occurs. Sometimes we don't have time to go home for preparing our stuff or to inform the family that we are going to go to the affected area and have to stay overnight for a few days to perform DVI operation day there. Moreover, in the affected area, the infrastructure do not meet women's need. Sometimes we have to live in a tent and share the restroom with the man. Based on those challenges, the commander tends to give this position, DVI, the head of DVI department, to male officer. However, because I have the capacity, the ability, experience at networking nationally and internationally on DVI, I was finally appointed to this position, beating several candidates who were all male officers. So in this great opportunity, I would like to encourage the women police to show and improve the contribution and the ability. Improving the skill and ability could be done by taking up higher education, courses and training, seminar, workshop, whether about leadership or whatever it is in your field. So also very important to build networking nationally and internationally, because it will enrich your insight and have open mind about each other experience. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and have a successful for women police in over the world. Thank you, Gail.
Thank you so much. Now, dear participants, we have the opportunity to ask questions to our dear panelists and myself. I will read several questions from the chat, and while you're entering your question, I would like also to introduce you to Dr. Melissa Jardine, who is one of the lead author of the research. Melissa has over 20 years of experience in police work and empirical policing and law enforcement research in Asia. Among other things, she's on the Strategic Planning Committee for the International Association of Women Police and convener of the Gender and Law Enforcement Special Interest Group of the Global Law Enforcement and Public Health Association. So I see some questions in the chat. There was a question on some of the recommendations mirror those from other global studies. How will these recommendations be implemented, monitored, and evaluated? So thank you very much for this question. And this is very important because we really see that this regional research is the first step. We want to have an understanding of where we are and what are the statistics, what are the issues, what are the barriers, what are the laws that are in place, what are the discriminatory issues. So we need to understand the situation to be able to actually put forward some recommendations and then implement them. So we are very conscious that we are on the step one of all of this process. And so for us, the second step is to be able to have dialogues and discussions with each and every countries of ASEAN member states who are willing and interested in this discussion with the UN Women and UNDC in particular, and to see how we can implement some of these recommendations. So we want to take this dialogue from a regional dialogue to a country-specific dialogue to see how the law enforcement agencies want to respond to these recommendations, and if they need any support from UN Women and UNDC with the support of Canada, we will be very pleased to support the implementation of these recommendations. If it's through action plan or if it's through changing, revising some of the laws, if there's a need to implement specific or review discriminatory laws, we are happy to support the way we can. So this is how we hope to be able to support law enforcement agencies and governments in each of the countries of ASEAN. And also we hope that ASEAN as an institution will also be interested in this research. And because there are specific recommendations that are targeted to ASEAN as an entity, we hope that we can also support ASEAN to implement and to monitor maybe the evolution, hopefully in the right direction of increasing the number of women in law enforcement in the future. This is in short an answer. I see another question, and I think Melissa will explain. There's a question on how we can explain potential or perceived disparity in the quotas being seen as a ceiling when those figures are not represented in the percentage of overall female police officers we see. And did a study considering any cultural issues which might contribute to the variance across the region. Melissa, this is a great question.
Great question. So we have the question about potential perceived disparity when those figures are not represented in the percentage of overall figures. I might need some clarification on the question, but it's possible that it may be referring to where the overall percentage of women in the police is different than the quota. So, for example, in some cases, the quota might be 20%, yet there might be 17%, or sometimes there's different variations. Each country across ASEAN has different policies and different recruitment practices which impact on this, as well as there are sometimes ways that women can join after graduating at another university, and that may not count towards the annual quota at the lower ranks. So to be a bit more specific, I can give examples. So Indonesia, I think they don't have a fixed percentage, but it's often around 10%, is what we were told. Listeners here and could clarify, but they also did have 2 campaigns where they recruited 5,000 women at once and another for 7,000, yet they still only have, I think, 6% overall. So when the recruitment isn't sustained, or they have a campaign but it's not sustained annually, then the number can be low. Another example is, well, Thailand have recently discontinued allowing women to join the academy. So, in fact, the quota for the Police Cadet Academy in Bangkok is now 0. The figures that we have from Thailand is that there's 15%, I think it was 15, about 15 commissioned officers. So that was one of the countries where we only have commissioned officer statistics. Most of those, I would suggest, have gone to an external university and then joined the police that way rather than the cadet academy. And now that they only had that recruitment pathway for 10 years. They instituted it in 2009. Before that, women couldn't join the cadet academy. And then 10 years later, they discontinued it. They're not exactly clear why that's happened, but it's possibly because the roles that they were deployed to didn't have family-friendly working hours, and so women were finding it difficult. They weren't being accommodated by their workplaces to fulfil their roles, and so they were dropping out and leaving the places they were deployed to. Another example might be Vietnam. They have a policy where they have 2 tiers of quotas. So they have a 10% quota for operational police and a 15% quota for logistics or administration. And so in Vietnam, the way that impacts there is that the exam score that you get on the recruitment application really has a big influence on whether they're accepted. So because women for operational may only have a 10% quota that they can fit into, the women that can fit into those small percentages have to have a very high exam mark, much higher than the average male participant. And then there's another example. Singapore doesn't have a quota, yet they have 17 or 19%. And this is where the cultural sort of factors are quite interesting too, because they didn't necessarily have formal policies for gender equality and inclusion, and yet they had a lot of other inclusive policies, which they had a lot of campaigns promoting women in special operations or dog squad or traffic. So there was some organisational cultural drivers there, but that's not consistent across all countries. I think in some countries the wider cultural issues where gender roles less, they're more rigid perhaps. Women were more likely to be in administration or logistics or office-based roles than, for example, in Singapore, where they had much more inclusive informal approaches and targeted campaigns to promote the diversity of roles in the police.
Thank you, Melissa. We received several other questions, which are very interesting. Thank you very much for that. I won't take them in specific order. There is one particularly on, is policing an attractive and inspiring option to young women, and what could make it more so, apart from the role models? Maybe I can give the floor to Maria and then Chaya to answer this, as themselves law enforcement officers.
Thank you, Gael. From my side, I would say that what makes policing an attractive or inspiring option to young women is actually the spirit of service that this profession has. So when you are a young professional police and you really want to serve your community, you find in the policing activities actually the best way to devote your life to gain security, to secure the lives of others during your duty. So role models are sometimes difficult to find when you are a police woman. We are minority in law enforcement, so sometimes it's hard to find role models. However, sometimes in the challenges, actually, you find actually the strength and the attractive or inspiring option actually to improve your career, just to improve your methods of your activities. So I think when you really feel policing is your calling, either in Asian countries or around the world, as our colleague said before, you need to follow this calling. It's something that comes from within, despite you find mentors or not. Mentors are important. They support you, they encourage you, they are your reflection, they mirror you in what you can do better and for your communities, for the civil society. But also I would like to underline that also challenges will help you to make your career even more interesting and more rich. So that would be my comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Chaya?
Yeah, thank you, Maria. I was just going to add to what Maria said. I think young women in this region, there are now more career focused and they want to achieve and fulfill in their career. So I think the agency needs to portray to the young women that women can also climb up to the high level to be at the decision-making level, because now when you look up, you mostly see male officers that's being in the higher position. So I think it's very important to portray to these young women that you can also climb up and function in a more decision making role in a traditionally male-dominated occupation, and you will be able to fulfill your career path in being a law enforcement officer. That's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you. We will move to the next question, which is, what do you think should be the first and most practical steps in improving women's participation in law enforcement? Maybe I can start and I give the floor then to Melissa. So one, in terms of, and of course, Maria and Tushaya, if you would like to add, please let me know. In terms of practical steps in improving women's participation in law enforcement, I think, if we can implement all of the recommendations, that would be perfect. But in terms of what's the most urgent, I think in terms of having a number as a ceiling is somehow difficult to overcome. If there's a ceiling of 10%, and we know that the ceiling is every year is attained, and there's actually more women that are interested to enter, but they can't because the quota is fulfilled, is problematic. The other issue are the discriminatory laws. I think when there is discrimination, it is against any international conventions such as CEDAW and other conventions. So these are elements that could be easily removed from legislation. And then there's also a question on the campaigns, and that's also something that I think is very important. And I think it's important that women can see themselves as police officers, and the women we've interviewed, from what I've seen, is that they say that it was an option because their father was a police officer, or a cousin or someone in their family, but it never occurred to me, for instance, I'm the only one in the room who's not a police officer, but it never occurred to me that it could be an option. And I think it's because most of the time it is portrayed as a male a career for men. And so it's important that the campaigns really depict this job as an opportunity for women and for men. So on the ads that are on TV, that are from law enforcement agencies, that we don't see only male officers. I saw, for instance, Singapore is doing a lot online, but also they're inviting community members to come and visit the police station and see what their job is really. So that's also interesting. I don't know if your other one would like to add, Melissa, Chaya, or Maria. And I see we're running out of time, so maybe that would be the last question, and then we'll close with the video.
Coming from this study, women who had progressed up in the career ladder in this study identified a number of elements to their success, and also for the success and participation of women in law enforcement. So the first they identified, it was the persistence and can-do attitude. The second most important thing, it was the importance of networking, both within the organization and with other women officers from countries nearby and internationally. The third aspect that they identify in this study, it was developing a specific subject expertise, including by participating in international meetings, international trainings. The fourth thing, it was supporting from the leadership. So they need support from the leadership of the organization and from international actors, such as we are, Interpol, UNODC, and UN Women. And you have this support. And mentorship. Mentorship, this suggests that international organizations and other like-minded development partners could further support women in law enforcement agencies with building their skills and competences, advocate for more leadership to enforce stricter gender-friendly policies and practices, and offer opportunities for networking and mentorship. Those are the 5 actually outcomes from the study that responds to this question.
Great, thank you very much. So I see a last comment, and thank you very much to Jane Tonsley. The international session of Women Police Annual Conference taking place in Indonesia in September 2021 provides fabulous opportunity to progress the recommendations from the reports. And so thank you. I think we have already secured a spot we would like to be part of this conference and share some of the finding of this research and hopefully progress made throughout the year. So thank you very much for that. And to end on a positive and humoristic note, I will leave you with a video that was created by comedians from Malaysia, supported by UNDC, UN Women and Interpol, and again with the support of the government of Canada, to promote women in law enforcement and highlight some of the findings of this research. Enjoy the video.
Hey everyone, it's Harith Iskander here.
And Xander Zain Iskander.
And we are back with another episode of Xander's Fun Facts. So Xander, what have you got for us today?
Today I read something really interesting.
Oh, you mean like a comic book with pictures and everything?
No. It's a report on women in law enforcement in the ASEAN region.
Yeah, I totally read this report too.
Sure you did. Did you know that having more women in the police department builds trust with the community?
Yeah, of course. I mean, nobody trusted me before I married your mother.
Of course. Wow, I wouldn't have trusted a haircut either.
All right, what's fun fact number 2, Mr. Funny Man?
Fun fact number 2 is, did you know that women police officers are fantastic when it comes to investigations and intelligence gathering?
Well, of course, gender-balanced teams are always more effective. I mean, like the Power Rangers versus the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. One group is packed with women and men and they're awesome and they get to do things and they get to go on dates and they're like totally in control. And the other group, what are they doing? Eating pizzas, hanging with a rat in a sewer. Huh.
I don't know what you mean, but I know you understand. This is not so fun fact. No ASEAN country has more than 20% of women in the police force.
Oh, no, we need much more of a split. I mean, can you imagine a peanut butter and jelly sandwich that only had like 20% jelly? That wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't even be a real peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It'd be like a peanut butter and a little bit of jelly sandwich. I wouldn't eat that sandwich. Would you eat that sandwich?
Another not so fun fact. In some countries, women are not even allowed to marry for a certain number of years after they graduate the police academy, even though men are.
What? That is so unfair. I mean, can you imagine if mom was not allowed to go back to work after we got married? Ugh.
Because women can do their job equally well, married or unmarried.
Exactly. Because that would mean I would need to go back to work instead.
Dad, do you think things are going to get better?
I really don't know, son, but I know someone who does.
Who?
Hi, Haris. Hi, Zander.
Hi, Dato Srina.
Hi.
So, Dato, tell us the story. What is the actual situation with women police in Malaysia?
Yes, there is a lot more work to be done, but the police force in Malaysia is moving in the right direction. For example, we got our first female deputy chief of police in Kuala Lumpur. And I'm the first woman to become the chief of police in Perlis. The progress is not just limited to Malaysia.
Okay, that's amazing. Bye. Awesome. But it's not all, Xander. There's someone else I want you to meet.
What?
Yeah, Lieutenant Colonel Molitas from Manila.
Hi, Xander. How are you guys?
So, Kim, tell us what's happening over there in the Philippines as far as women police are concerned.
I think that my country and the Philippine National Police Organization has really done a great job in providing gender equality in the organization. I think we're one of the police organizations in the world who is giving equal opportunity for women. We are mandating the women's desks for all police stations, and also we have outlawed the discriminatory practices against women at every level, so every woman police in this country is given the equal opportunity.
Thank you very much, Kim. Thank you. Appreciate it. Bye. Wow, we have met some amazing female superheroes, Xander.
Yeah. When I grow up, I'm going to be a female police officer.
And why not indeed? Although that might be a subject for a completely different episode.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. For more facts about the important topic of women in law enforcement, please check out this report by the UN Women Interpol and UNODC by clicking on the link.
Xander, you so totally didn't read that off a script.
Oh. Okay.
I will see you soon in another episode of Xander's Fun Facts.